Let's get started. Am I audible in the back? All right. Quick round check. How many are business owners, product managers? Okay. How many are engineers, DevOps, operations? Okay, we have a mixed group. And how many are first time attending the conference? This. Okay. All right. All right, my talk is about empowering customers to self-solve. My name is Manikandan Sivanesan, and I work for Red Hat as a senior software engineer at Red Hat Customer Portal Search team. Agenda is simple. What is self-solve and why it matters to the customers and the business, and how at Red Hat we are using search to enable self-solve. Quiz. Do you know when is the first time self-service was introduced? Just a guess. 69? 92? It was 100 years back. 1927 was the first time self-service grocery stores were introduced. So, and self-service is really, really common these days. And, all these are examples of self-service, right? Here, speedy delivery of the service is the expectation from the customer, and businesses needs to match up to these expectations. So what is exactly self-service here? There is no business service representative in here, and all forms of interactions that happens between the customer and the business is the self-service here. I'm going to actually use self-service and self-solve interchangeably. The reason behind it is we have self-solve is basically, in self-service, you expect the product or service to work as expected. But when actually customers face with any issues or they have any questions around the product, what do they do? So they would actually expect that the tools and delivery of these particular service to be effective, and if it meets their needs, they would actually use it. But if there is a problem, businesses needs to provide that kind of helps, FAQs, documentation, knowledge base, etc. This is an example of how our customers actually face each and every day. If the customer actually has an issue, say for example, a server in their data center actually failed, user would not able to actually access their business. They will lose revenue, and I can actually able to say that many of the developers and operations can able to actually associate with these kinds of situations. They want their server to be fixed now. What is the ideal scenario here? So typically they would face with some kind of error messages. They expect a self-solve site that would provide a relevant content to them. And if the search actually provides the relevant content to them, which describes exactly what is the root cause, what are all the different environment, and that is the example and success of a self-solve. Customers been faced with issues, they demand for answers now. They hate actually waiting, irrespective of if it is a simple question or complex question. So because the average waiting time varies depending upon the severity and complexity of the issue. Businesses actually cannot ignore these kinds of self-solve as this is not a value-add service but an essential service. This is the most important takeaway for the business owners. Why self-solve matters? Why self-solve matters for the customers? So you typically customers expect when faced with any question there, like with the product usage or any errors, they would rely on these kinds of knowledge-based platforms, FAQs, how-tos, virtual agents, and other troubleshooting guides, etc. And if these actually provide accurate and relevant content, they actually they are willingly and would use it rather than reaching out for a service representative. It puts them back in the the driver's seat. It gives control to those customers without being helpless. Unless your business actually provides 24/7 support across the geo, it's not always possible for each and every businesses. So self-service platforms will be available around the clock, anytime, anywhere. Most important of all, it saves times for the customer. Getting instant answers to their problem is the fastest way to achieve that, the fastest response time. This is a quote from Harvard Business Review. The live service interaction, the average cost of live service interaction is typically more like $7 for a B2C company versus $13 for a B2B company. Look at the do-it-yourself kind of transaction. It really costs in pennies. So the companies needs to actually realize this. There is an immense opportunity in saving cost. As I mentioned, it actually really saves support costs for the business, because support staff can actually work. They need to actually just work on just one time on creating a knowledge content. And this could be actually reused for the same repetitive issue. And they can able to work on more complex cases. Scaling the business. If the product portfolio of a business actually keeps on increasing, companies need to actually look into strategies on how to scale the business effectively. They cannot keep on hiring the support staff. Self-service should be part of their strategy. Better resource allocation for, they could actually able to spend time on faster resolution of the cases by using the tools and creating tools to better analyzing their cases, etc. How we are doing at Red Hat. So how many are familiar, know about Red Hat? Most of them, okay. Red Hat is an open source company here, and we are a publicly traded one. I'm just going to explain what who are not familiar with Red Hat. And I do want to mention that we are not just a Linux company anymore. We are more than that. We have several product offerings ranging from different container platforms in the form of PaaS offering, and then middleware for application servers, and OpenStack for deployment, and also Ansible for management and operation related tasks. And communities are extremely important to us. In fact, it is part of our DNA. We want to be a catalyst in our communities of customers, contributors, partners, etc. And we have a subscription-based business model. It is different from the typically traditional licenses where people purchase traditional license in order to use the product. We essentially earn revenue through subscriptions. If the customers actually become the subscriber, they are entitled not only to the products, the knowledge base, documentation, security advisories, etc. This is a product portfolio that we have. Don't worry about trying to read it about it. So the reason I want to actually share this is because our customers has complex deployments. They should be able to run their the software that they are subscribed to, in public, private, hybrid cloud deployments. So, and they use and the error messages that they face, the issues that they face, it comes in various languages like Python, Java, etc. So they should be able to answer simple questions, because customer satisfaction is typically tied to ease of product use, and then how can they answer their own questions. I just want to clarify. Support. I mentioned support case, ticket, etc. They are all terms in the the customer support industry, and support definite and basically it's just a customer support request. That's it. Like a tracking mechanism. That's it. So this is the primary way that customers access their subscription. The value of the Red Hat subscription comes from Red Hat Customer Portal, and they access FAQs, documentation, knowledge base, etc. And typically look for certified vendors and hardwares if they can run RHEL, Linux, etc. And they want to ensure that their products are secure, and they get up-to-date security advisories. And we are an award-winning support for the 8th consecutive year. We are one of the best support sites. And on-site search is very critical for us in order to actually discover, for the customers to discover these kind of content. And there are a number of lab apps which allows the customers to configure or to self-solve their problem, to check their systems whether the systems are vulnerable or not. So there are lots of apps that allows them to actually self-solve, and search is one of the primary ways that they can discover these apps and content. So we ran a survey with our customers, and this is what they responded with. What is the primary reason that you visit our customer portal site? These are the top 5 tasks. I just wanted to mention that they want to use the knowledge base to solve a problem, and download product software, open a new support case, troubleshoot a server error message, and use tools and resources to solve their issue without opening a support case. Out of these top 5 tasks, at least 3 out of them, mentions that they want to actually solve the problem without trying to. So they are really, really motivated to actually solve the problem. So how we are actually delivering self-solve. The primary way here is having a functional and relevant search. There are 2 paths to it, 2 experiences. One is the portal search, the default on-site search. The other one is troubleshooting experience. Especially after listening to that particular kind of feedback, we realize that there needs to be a troubleshooting kind of experience where they want to solve the problem. And I do want to actually mention additional, not only like search. There are additional machine learning related tool automation that happens in order to do faster resolution of the cases. I do want to mention these 3 non-search pieces because user experience is very important. I have faced with many bad implementation of self-service. Anybody used IVRs? How hard it is. I just wanted to get the answer. Why are you asking me to keep pressing buttons? So user experience is very critical. You want to actually promote the self-service or self-solve, but do not ever force it upon the customer. That is one of the key lessons that I want to mention as well. If the customer wants to actually directly reach out to an agent, let them to. Support. The support staff actually, they are actually working on customers' issues. They need to actually follow a knowledge-centered support process. What it means that is when they are actually when they first get a support case, they need to actually make sure that they diagnose everything, they identify whatever the diagnostic data that is relevant, and make sure that they capture it in a structured way. And as they are actually resolving the problem, they need to actually ensure that this particular problem is solved by this knowledge content. They need to actually link it as part of that support case. This would actually act, it's a this is a way of actually collecting, in search, you would actually typically expect for this particular search, what is the expected document, right? So it's a judgment list that you would rely on experts to provide. And this is our key, this is part of the process itself. Like support engineers need to actually link their content, knowledge-based article. And last but not least, the content. Typically, many of the things that I look at is, especially when we are actually building a product, we typically want to, these are the features, these are the things that our product would provide. But we also need to actually ensure that what are all the customer goals that they want to typically do. Like how do I configure this? When we are creating content, like we had to actually ensure that what are all the customer goals that in mind. And this is built using Lucidworks Fusion and powered by Apache Solr. We have our own custom indexing and search application, and it's a Java application. It's deployed on JBoss Enterprise Application Platform. One second. So, as I mentioned, this is also one of the ways that that customers would like to actually discover their the content, get to know about the product, and when they search for error messages, we need to actually answer that. So we have the product filtering and the different content types that serves them. So we have those content type filtering as well. There are certain cases where we know that what's the typical answer that we need to provide. So we have those key matching component that using query elevation component, Solr's query elevation component. So and then also like when the customer wants to actually know about like what is the first thing that they would do. So we need to actually have like some form of knowledge graph that would actually eventually land them to downloads and etc. I do want to actually talk a little bit about what are all the different categories of queries that we get in portal search. So I classified into 3: low intent, high frequency queries. These are all large number of queries, and primarily they are product focused, where they want to know about a given product like Rel, Ansible, OpenShift, etc. And also there are like number of queries which they want to know about a particular piece of technology or a component. And then the second categories of queries are high intent, low frequency queries. It's mostly around the thing that I mentioned, customer goals, how to configure something, and more of a fact check based type of question. Here I was listing about what are all the number of open files, what are the hold limit on the open files. The third category of query are the error messages. So they typically face with an error message and try to copy some of the trace, extract, trace, and trace back, and then search it in our error messages in the customer portal search. And it contains a lot of punctuations and okay. So for the first type of query, we have a lot of these product-based search queries here. So when we look at it, it is of different forms where customer use it like a lot of acronyms, and for Rel, it's Rel, Red Hat Linux, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So there is always a mismatch with how in the content it is represented versus what the customers are looking for. And think about the product portfolio that we have, and we have to actually ensure that we have this straightened out for all the products. So as everybody, we started with building our own synonyms list, and I actually went ahead and tried to actually create our synonyms list for the entire products that we have at Red Hat. And it is a manually maintained one, and I need to come up with different acronym variations, and it is really hard, especially like for a search engineer. Like there are like lots of products that we have, so doing this manually, it is really a cumbersome process. And also there are this actually worked for a bit, especially when they specify just product and mention. But it's not always possible because we are an open source company, so we take the upstream components and make it into build it into productize it. It's always customers typically specify the upstream components and technology specific words. So how can we actually identify those? We started with actually, came to know about word2vec, and when word2vec is a form of learning the representation of the words and phrases. So basically, the idea of word2vec is you give a bunch of text and create a word2vec model, and then it outputs a sequence of numbers, right? So we can able to identify what are all the most similar words. Similar, I want to mention clearly that it's not synonyms, you cannot use it, because we did it exactly how with our own data, our customer queries, content, and it actually worked well for identifying the relatedness of the words, where for OpenShift, I can able to identify Kubernetes, which is a central piece of an orchestration system. But how can I actually integrate it as part of our product? Like, I cannot use it as a synonym, but the thing was I could actually able to use it to, if someone are searching for Kubernetes, I can able to infer that they want to know about OpenShift. Similarly, there is for Karaf, even I came to know about Karaf. It's an upstream component of application server. So when I was playing with word2vec, I can able to identify, yes, it's related to this product. So we use it to actually source it as part of our product detection component, where we do it in the pre-processing of the query before we send it to Solar. We identify that this particular query we use, this customer is talking about this product, and do a boosting of the product accordingly. This is an interesting one. For the second category of query where customers ask about how to configure something and how to do something, there are a number of different content types that we serve: knowledge base, documentation, vulnerabilities, etc. And when you start with a search application, you typically start with like title and single catch-all field. That's all we know as a search engineer. So there are like 25 different types of content we have. As the years grow, like more and more contents are getting like into the search index. So it is not always possible. We as a search engineer could not able to determine like what is the most important field that can actually answer customer's query. Especially like we looked at like the documentation as one example of the content type, where they are actually published in a book type format. Even in Solar, there is typically it's like in older versions you would look at in a PDF format, right? So if you want to actually like look for a specific piece of like, how do you know about how to determine like how to use the cursor functionality, right? So they are all typically in the sections part where customers want to know about that particular piece, right? So the content owners actually know much more about which particular fields are relevant and which would answer the questions, but they cannot able to actually specify, communicate that to us. So we actually moved to a model which is from single catch-all field to a multiple field-based approach, where we actually we have like 5 different tiers, where tier A being the most important and tier D is the least important, and and let them ask the content owners, okay, can you able to identify the fields and then able to actually map it to the tiers? Then we could based on their importance, And then we would actually like do the search across those multiple tiers and can able to apply different boosts for those different tiers. This actually, allowed us to have like better communication model between our content owners and the search engineers. And when we run the A/B testing with our default ranking model, like single catch-all field versus this, this actually performed much better, and also allowed us to, it provides us opportunities for, tuning the content better. This is the third category of query, and this is the most toughest of all, because we allow users to actually, can able to perform wildcard queries and other kinds of queries, but they also actually try to actually search for error messages. I don't know whether people can read here. So here actually the user is trying to actually search for a transaction timeout JBoss related error. In fact, we actually do that a lot. We dog food our own search because we deploy our applications in JBoss, and when we face with JBoss errors, we actually try to dog food our own product, make sure that are we getting relevant content or not. So it is one of the initial design was we want to actually act as like a keyword search base where every tokens must present in order for a document to match. We started with a naive approach. Just don't assume anything, just search for whatever the user has provided. And then instead of running a single query, we run a series of query. We would actually loosen it up, until we get some results. Because it's much better than providing zero results. So how do I configure something ? And in certain cases, we would go with first search for how do I configure something exactly as it is, and then loosen it up by removing our special characters. And then in these cases, we need to actually split up into individual tokens and then search it accordingly until we get results. It is a mixed one, success. Certain cases it would work, certain cases it doesn't. So the thing which we realized was customers want to actually search for more and more error messages, and they want to actually have not just portal search but they want some kind of a troubleshooting application that allow them to solve their errors and stuff. So we went ahead with this particular new experience where customers can able to specify what product and version, and also they could actually specify the summary of the issue, and then they can provide additional, because error messages alone is not enough to debug it. So we need additional context about where this is occurring, and then so we want to actually explicitly allow the customer to specify it, and also there are challenges associated with it. Customers provide really vague summary. System failed to connect. Really vague, and it is not always possible to actually like provide most relevant content. We need additional context and also more information about the problem that they are facing. So we are not trying to solve all of our customer cases through the self-solve. It is whatever that we can. We want that customer to actually like able to troubleshoot themselves. And also this is not the the default search bar that you see, right? So customers can provide a longer form of text. How do you identify the most important tokens here? And should we use like everything, or should we use just the most important keywords? Like, so there are challenges associated with it. And also customers when they submit information here, right? There are certain root causes might be hidden in their the diagnostic data, like stack traces and things like that. So which they need to provide in the form of attachments. And attachment processing typically would take more time, and we want to actually get the response immediately. So we want to actually ensure that there is a separate process that would analyze their attachments, and if it finds any insights, it would actually give it to the support engineers, which is outside the scope here, but at least would allow them to solve the case really quicker. Couple of things that we have tried, only the most important tokens. So we use the edismax query parser. So we need to actually pre-process this long text blob, and this edismax query parser would create this shingles for the bigrams and trigrams for the phrase query, right? What we realized was, for the people who in the back, capsule does not have an installation media. That's that's the problem query, and the bigrams and trigrams generated, it is actually missing an important keyword capsule if it is like led and followed by the stop words. So what we did was we had to actually move our stop words handling from our original query analysis chain into our application so that we could actually clean it up and remove it completely, and then can able to provide, and this actually allowed them to provide, improve the phrase matches here. All right. So what are all the important relevance signals that we could use for ranking purpose here? We use two types of feedback. One is the customer feedback, and the second one is the associated feedback. So customer feedback, user clicks, we have seen in this conference a lot of time, like we use signals and aggregation capabilities of Fusion. And the idea is that we would capture the clickstream data and aggregate it based on the query and the document that that was most that was clicked most, and boost it as part of our query pipeline. This actually worked it was very helpful for us. It actually improved our CTRs. And then the second type of feedback is the associate feedback, which I mentioned a bit, where when a case comes in, the associate would need to actually solve the problem and then would link that knowledge content. So for each type of for this problem query, we have this knowledge content. So we looked at the can we use this for this knowledge content? How many number of cases this is resolving? Can we use the popularity of this particular content as a signal measure? And then we also index our support case collection support cases in a separate collection. So when a problem query comes in, we run a more like this type of query against this case collection, and try to get the linked solutions that we and then use it as part of our boosting. Two problems with it, which is you have to be really a time bound one. We faced it. I guess even USA Network faced it. So we had the same problem. We had to use a time decay function in order to make sure that the document that was clicked a year back is not relevant anymore. So similarly, we have to ensure that we consider only the cases that were closed in the last 365 days. So how we are evaluating it? So we have this data set where the previously closed cases and the corresponding linked knowledge content. So we know for a given problem, we have this exact answer to that particular problem. So the idea is that if the same problem comes again, we need to actually ensure that the search provides it in the search results. So for a given set of cases, we need to ensure that the metric is basically provide what is the percentage of the linked content that we are showing in the top 1, 3, and 6 ranks. That's how we measure it. And the tuning is we try to actually create whatever the maximized score that is provided by the different boost parameters. So that's how we choose our best parameters. And it is very hard to tune in practice, because an engineer has to actually try it with different values, and it is a really it requires number of manual hours to come up with this. But we did this. The way that we tune, we don't actually consider individual products. We add those boost parameters across the products based on across the products. So one thing was which we determined was, instead of actually like focusing on, and the self-solve rate was not at all going up. So, okay, instead of actually focusing on all the products, at least can we actually focus on the top most products where the support volume was really, really high. So we split it into, we just focus on the top 6 products that we get the major number of, that we get the most number of cases. What we determined was, what we identified as the popularity, link popularity, does not actually like matter for the newer cases. In fact, it is very, very detrimental, and it was hurting us really badly. So we had to actually disable the link popularity for our emerging products. And we started doing the individual tuning for the top products. It depends, it varies. How much time are you actually willing to spend for tuning? In fact, this is when we actually disabled that link popularity, the scores actually really went high. It's from 22 to 36%. And the rest of the thing is, if the associates actually following the process and can able to link the content, it would actually like work. So what's the journey ahead? So I do want to give a shout out to my former colleague who actually created, who contributed this product the LTR method RankNet to Solar. So this is actually available in Solar 7.3. We are actually, instead of trying to tune for specific products manually, can we actually use the learning to rank method to tune it better? So this is a work in progress. Probably this, we will actually share our results after once we get, once we deploy it in prod. Because until we actually deploy it in prod, after attending this conference, like I don't trust my the measures. So the results, we actually conducted our A/B testing where we introduced our self-solve based homepage. Where the control group does not actually have this self-solve, where the experiment group has the self-solve. And there is an increase in traffic that confirms us that customers are really motivated to do the self-solve. And we saw a 7% decrease in the case creation rate or self-solve rate for the experiment group. So we actually made it as the default one. So we are actually looking out for the the metrics that it's still ongoing. So I do want to mention about the other areas that we are working on for faster resolution of the cases. The first one is the specialty-based case routing. What it means that like customers typically create support case for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, but behind the scenes there are a number of specialty groups like kernel group, networking group, storage group, etc. So typically a frontline engineer has to actually look at the case and route it or tag it manually in order to get to the appropriate group. So this was actually what we started building a rule engine first, and then moved to a Mahout classifier and started using deep learning models. Currently the accuracy is at 85%. This has been for a while like constant tuning from 78 to it moved to 85. And the second one was the language detection, detecting the language of the case it is in, and routed to the corresponding support engineer who can handle that particular case. We initially looked at Solar, but the problem with that was the case, Solar language detection capabilities would work for longer form of text. It would not work for small text, or if it is in multiple language. Our support cases has typically it would have Chinese, and then like the stack traces would be in English, right? So we switched to using a fast text based language classifier, which worked pretty good, and the accuracy is at 99%. And credits to my team members who has like worked on this problem and building this product. And that's all I have. Questions? Yes.
Did you feel during interface? Sorry, I don't know if I missed that your front end. Did you build that yourself? Did you use an existing solution?
No, we built ourselves.
So you had 3 different types of search: the product, the specific, and the error message.
Yes.
Did you just have one search box that took any one of those 3, and how did you figure out how to route to the right?
So these are all 2 different experiences where if they we do want to promote that self-solve behavior. Previously, we just had one customer portal search, that is the one box, and especially after seeing the lot of search queries like that, we want to actually ensure that the solution engine was introduced as a new experience, so it's an additional one. I don't know, it could actually converge.
That's very impressive what you guys did. Are you going to make it open source or part of Vision? What's your plan for this?
For troubleshooting, understanding the...
No, the whole process you built, are you going to make it available on Solar, Fusion?
That's a good question. So, is it the troubleshooting part of it, or is it everything? Yeah, all right, we'll talk offline. All right, thank you so much.